Everyone, if you haven't met Robert White, I'm so thankful I did, and just really great to be talking to him later in life. But Robert White is one of the premier gurus of personal development in the entire world. You were taught by some of the best that really started that whole movement, and especially as far as applying it to business. And it makes so much sense now. But I would like to just tell you, ask you about your background. How did you get into this? I don't think you woke up and as you got into becoming an adult, you probably didn't think, when I get up, I want to get into personal training and help people be successful and go to Japan, especially, and just become really famous over there, leading all sorts of people over several decades. So, how did this all begin, Robert?
A precursor to the story is that even though I grew up in abject poverty and abuse, somehow I always wanted to do better. I realized we do a lot of work on with clients about purpose, having a clear statement of purpose. And I realized looking backwards, my purpose was I'll never be poor again. And which motivated me. And there's a big piece of it that created a missing aspect of my life. And maybe we'll talk about that today, maybe not. But when I was 17, as a kind of turning point in some ways, is I had the highest rated radio show in the state of Wisconsin. The audience at that time were teenagers, and I was one, and I identified with them, and that worked well for me. And I became the kid from the wrong side of the tracks that everybody wanted to know. And I graduated number six in my high school class of 300. I was a commencement speaker. I was chosen most likely to succeed by my classmates. And 10 years later, skipping to 27, which is the answer to your question, I had done everything I could do to make my classmates wrong. I had an early marriage that failed, and I felt horribly guilty about it. I had a small sales business in one of the early network marketing companies, and I was failing. And at that, I'd had some health problems. I'd been told that I would not live longer than 35 years. I had daily chest pain. My life was a mess. And a couple of good friends in similar businesses took me aside and said, we've done this training out in California and called Mind Dynamics. And it's good, and we think it would really be good for you. So I spent 6 months making them wrong, of course. And then I finally did that training. And Dave, it's a cliche to say that it was life changing, but it was. Not the next day five wasn't my whole life changed instantly, but what got put in place during those 4 magical days for me were principles that I knew, but I wasn't practicing. And it woke me up. And I started shifting in how I was with people, in how I managed my life on a daily basis. And I think, by the way, that's something we can talk about today in a positive sense, because what I discovered is that the rules for success had been taught for thousands of years and they're already known. It was my drift away from them, my lack of awareness of them, that was the problem. Anyway, that's how it happened. My income tripled the year after that training, even though not one word was said in it about money or business. And the following year, it went up 10 times. I started making more money in a month than I'd ever made in a year. But more than that, my relationships got better. Just my life got better and just in every possible way. That's how it all started. And of course, when you get excited about something, and for people in Avini, this is, I think, a key. When you're really excited about something, you tell everybody about it, and you do it with unbridled enthusiasm, and and they are attracted to you, and they want to be part of what you're part of. So that was my experience, and I sold that sales business and moved to New York City. I went from supervising 31 people and I managed them by interviewing every one of them every week. I went from that to 850 salespeople. And so I couldn't interview everybody. So I started doing weekend seminars. And this is actually where I met Larry Profit, was he was doing something similar in a different city. But when we met to exchange ideas, that's how we became friends more years ago than I care to admit, because then you would know how ancient I am and that he is. So that's the background. In those weekend seminars, I started inviting the mind dynamics, the local mind dynamics instructor to come and speak. And then frankly, I would do the closing, and I enrolled over 400 people in mind dynamics trainings because I believed in them. I didn't understand them. I wasn't getting paid to do that. I just knew that if they went through that training, their chances of success multiplied exponentially. And so that's the background. One day, the chairman of Mind Dynamics, the founder, the guru behind the whole thing, telephoned me, and I didn't even know his name. And he invited me to come out to California, which I did. And that led to 10 days later accepting the job of president of Mind Dynamics. So that's how I got engaged. And I got engaged not on the training side of things, because I didn't understand that at all, and I hadn't been trained to do it, but rather on running the business, which was something I had some experience with and that I could contribute. So that's how it all started for me. And later I went through the trainer training. I started leading trainings eventually, and the rest of that story is something only a reader could work its way through. That's my story. My love for that experience translated into my network marketing business, and people started being attracted to me instead of being repelled by me. That's saying it in a simple way, but that's the truth. Um, and then it all started working.
Oh, that's the every man's story. If you think of a movie or a book or just life itself, is you have a quest and then you find a mentor to show you how, and you go through all of that stuff and come out winning. And I think you've definitely lived that life. And maybe a little bit more on that. So, how did you get to Japan?
Uh, the first two, I ran Mind Dynamics for 4 years. I was an employee for 4 years, but I had a lot of entrepreneurial space that Alexander Everett, the founder, created for me. So it was like having my own business. And the first 2 years was fixing the US business. Alexander was so magnetic, charismatic, so informed, so educated in a profound sense. So he attracted people like me as a student, and then we supported the training. And so everything was growing like crazy, but it was a mess. And so I got to do that for the first 2 years. But the second 2 years, I ran around the world setting up foreign subsidiaries. And for a young guy, it was an incredible experience to have, for a kid that grew up in Green Bay, Wisconsin, on the wrong side of the tracks, to have a deluxe luncheon in the Alps with multimillionaires. I looked around and thought, how did I get here? That kind of thing happened a lot. But we were very successful internationally. And the one country we said no to was Japan. It was, of course, the mind dynamics training heavily dependent on language. And the Japanese language is one way to describe it, is that it's backwards. So that was a barrier. Secondly, we require space, and that's at a premium in Japan. There's very little space, therefore, it is very expensive. And all other expenses were high there at that time. And we were in overwhelm. We had taken on too much. So I said no. And those of you that have had some experience with Japanese culture know this and are not surprised by it, which is that about once a month for the next 3 years, somebody telephoned or faxed me a request to come to Japan. And as I went through changes in my life, it never worked for me. And then I formed a company called LifeSpring, which went on to have 17 training centers in the US and was very successful. But I sold it 6 months after I founded the company. I left my own company because it was not working for me. And actually, some of that forms the basis for the work I do today with entrepreneurs and executives. But I had put every cent that I had into LifeSpring. It was self-funded, and I sold it for nothing down and forever to pay to my own staff. So I'm broke. I've got a family. I've got a mortgage. I've got a life. and unemployable, I think. And I get this call from Japan where they said, come for 90 days. We're changing the offer. Come for 90 days, set up a program, and then you can leave and we will pay you for 1 year. So years later, with 7 training centers in Japan and thousands of people going through the training every month, people would say, did you have a vision for this? And the honest answer is no. I went to Japan because I was unemployed. I had a family to support. It looked like an interesting opportunity. I'm a bit of a risk taker. I'm entrepreneurial down to the cellular structure. And that's why I did it. I went there for 3 months, ended up staying for 12 years the first time, expanded that work into the Philippines, into Taiwan, into Hong Kong, into Australia, into mainland China. So we eventually had 15 centers, 240 full-time people, and another 60 contract trainers. Brought the training back to the US, but doing it with corporate audiences for culture change. So that's a bit of the history.
Oh, this is so fantastic. One of the things I just think is like you have a purpose in life, especially a big purpose, a massively transformative purpose where you're just really on fire about it, and then find somebody to show you how to do that, have a vehicle to apply that to, and then just go to work and keep in touch with your mentor. That's so much of success, in my opinion. And it's just the funnest way to live your life. And at this moment right now, we're with a company that have all the stuff I've done, which is getting close to 50 years of being in this wonderful world of network marketing, to date myself a little bit too. I've never seen a more exciting product, a more exciting company to work with, the best leadership, the best time to be in. And it's fun to be in my 70s and think, this is going to be my very favorite decade. This is my turn to shine and go big and bring a lot of people with me. And I'm just excited to have you give us in a nutshell, how do you do this? What's the fundamental thing? You've got a book, which is a wonderful title, not just be ordinary, be extraordinary, have an extraordinary life. Why not play big and just be on your A game? And what a great vehicle to be in. And then have people like you to show us the way. You talk about three fundamental things. It seems like everything goes in threes. What are your three key factors that are critical to be successful in this business?
Years ago, there's a guy named Victor Kiam, and he did a series of television commercials where he said it was about Remington shavers, electric shavers. Those of you that are a bit older will remember him. He did his own commercials, and he said that he liked the shaver so much that he bought the company, which was actually a true story. In my case, I was sending students, my prospective trainers, back to the USA to one of my mentors, Dr. John Enright, for a training called the ARC training, ARC. And they were coming back and raving about the training. And then he stopped and he moved on to something else, which was a pattern in his life. He's just one of those curious people that would uproot everything and start something new. So he did that. So I knew about that, and I was disappointed because the training was so effective for our budding trainers in terms of expanding their knowledge, the underpinnings of our work. So at the same time, I went to hear a speech by the founder of Sony, the big electronics company, where somebody from the floor asked him the question, "How did you choose that name?" And he explained it. And what I realized is that at that time, I had 3 businesses in Japan: the personal growth training business, a sales training business, and a consulting company, all with different names. And I realized I'm trying to build a brand in this crazy environment that I'm in the nation of Japan. And I'm trying to build 3 different images, 3 different brands for my work. And I needed to have one name. And I thought, ARC, isn't that an interesting name? Because it is an acronym for awareness, responsibility, and communication, ARC. I called John. I said, can I use your name? He said, yeah, we're done with it. We changed the company name to ARC International. And that's the answer to your question, Dave, is that if you want to simplify what we've done is we help people increase their awareness to wake up, to start really noticing other people, noticing their environment, noticing the systems that we operate in. And also that to do that, what's absolutely necessary is to take personal responsibility for all of your responses in your life, to give up the victim role, to give up the unconscious role, that's awareness, give up the victim role, that's taking personal responsibility. And then the C is for communication, that in today's world, we need to develop a mastery level of communicating, certainly spoken, but also in writing, also in body language, also in every way that we communicate, in our choice of clothing, every way that we communicate. So if I were reduced to a 5 minute speech on how to improve your life, it would be to wake up, own it, and communicate better, said simply.
When you're thinking about that, my mind goes back to something I was reading some time ago, and it talked about communication and people that are like in penal institutions, people are really having trouble in life. They had a fairly limited vocabulary, and really successful people, in any way you want to measure success, they had much larger vocabularies and so much of success as other people, of course. And in order to have a relationship, you got to be able to communicate. And especially where we're doing something like Avini, it's all communication. Essentially, we become really good storytellers, but equally important, we become interested in other people, and it's all just communication. You're absolutely right. Maybe flesh out all of those things. Wow,
Well,
awareness, responsibility. What a big thing. Be responsible. I think one of the big things between even mental health is if you wonder if you're crazy or not, if you actually take personal responsibility, you're probably not. People that are messed up, they say it's not my fault. It's not me. It's something else. So I think that's a really big thing, responsibility.
there's a famous book that said it all begins with the word. And but it's been taught by the great teachers throughout history. It's not new. There's nothing that really we do that's new. And so, first of all, personal thing that it just popped into my head, Dave. Congratulations to you and your lovely wife on 52 years of marriage. I've been very successful in a lot of areas of life. Marriage is not one of them, so I admire people that have that kind of commitment to each other. So, congratulations, my friend.
Thank you.
And but the other thing is that when the early days of doing our training is in Japan, I was in the back of the room a lot, particularly in our advanced training and training trainers, observing them and then coaching them to be better, but to be better in Japanese, not in English. And the one of the students in one of those advanced trainings was a guy that you got to know and who had a really big impact on your life is Isamu Masuda was a student in one of those advanced trainings. I didn't know anything about him. Just another student, just a guy that shows up in the room, had some personal issues, got a little bit stuck. And with a rookie trainer, if they were struggling with one of the students and dealing with their issues, most of the time I would just let them, in effect, let them fail a little and struggle, and then coach them later. But if there was risk to the student, I would step in and take over the training. And that happened with Mr. Masuda. And it created a relationship that I treasure, that I am grateful for. I learned so much from him and was able to contribute a bit to him. My interpreter, Tom Watanabe, ended up running that company eventually. A lot of connections. But it was all based on that simple formula of awareness, responsibility, and communication. But the piece of it that I thought might be valuable today, and people, I would recommend taking some notes on this if our listeners and viewers can, but whether they can or cannot, at the end of this, I'll tell them how to get a written version of what I'm about to share. And as my gift to them and to you, when we started being pretty successful, about 1,000 new students a month. Now that eventually grew to over 4,000 new students a month, and that's how we expanded around Asia. But when we started getting really a bit successful, I noticed something. We had a money back guarantee. If you didn't get the value that we promised you or that you assumed you were going to get from our training, we gave you your money back. And we have 17 years of numbers. And I can tell you that we gave the money back in 1.7% of the cases. Now, my staff would say, since they thought, and nobody should ever ask for their money back, they would say that there's some graduates who enroll people by saying, go do this training, and then just tell them you didn't get value, you get your money back. So free training. And I think that probably happened a few times. But also, there were some people that wanted something from the training that they didn't get. So they got a refund, but less than 2%. If it went over that in any month, we, the alarm bells rang and we started looking at what are we doing wrong? If it went lower than that, we felt satisfied and confident about our work. And then the second noticing beyond those numbers was that everybody went to the same room, everybody went to the same training, everybody went to the same outline and content, and yet, and 98 plus percent of them got value. But some people, they grabbed the gold ring, they blew the whistles, they did everything right and became hugely successful. And we started noticing those people that the success stories were so inspiring, and yet we're curious. Why do some people get good, solid value from our training and support us and put more people in the training, all the good things, and yet some people get value that's almost unmeasurable? An example is that there was an early effort in those years for the Japanese company Honda to get an open wheel racer and win the F2 series and all of those exotic cars, and they didn't win. And what I didn't know was that their driver, usually you have one driver as the main driver for the team, came to our training. Somebody enrolled him in our training. And he went out after the training, after a short time after the training, he won the only F2 race in the history of motor racing by a Japanese. I mean, they had that Honda, those great engines, but the driver was blocked in some way. He went to our training, he cleared that up, and he claimed his talent by winning a race, by being on that platform, popping the champagne bottles and all that stuff that they do when they win. So those kinds of things were happening. So we did some research, over 1,000 people, and we talked to them about hugely successful people. What is it such that you got so much value from our training? And what came out of that was we found that those people came into our training with certain principles that they were living in their life. And so they approached the training from that same perspective through the lens of what had worked for them in the rest of their life. And initially, we identified 5 behaviors, 5 principles, 5 elements. And then gradually over time, it's expanded to 8. So that's what I thought might be valuable quickly to share with your audience, Dave, is what we call the 8 principles for success in your personal life and your business life. Does that sound like something your folks might benefit from?
Oh, yes, and yes, absolutely.
Here goes. So, again, I'd like you to consider taking notes, and I'd like you to consider putting, after you take the note on each one of these principles, is put a number from 1 to 10. 10 would be that you should be teaching the class on that principle. You're living it, you understand it, it's in depth for you, you own it. You could talk about it a lot more effectively than Robert White could. All right. Uh, and if it's a 1, 2, 3, 4, what you're saying is I'm maybe I knew about that principle, but I'm not practicing it, or maybe I didn't know about it. In any event, it's not working for me. The number I'll suggest that you not use is 5. I'm going to suggest that everyone is either a bit more effective or a bit less effective with each of these principles. Now, this is very personal. You're not going to reveal the numbers to anybody unless you want to. So just try to be honest with yourself, not being overly critical. Something that used to really bedevil me was being down on myself, but also not smoking your own dope, not being in some kind of law of fairyland. But try to be honest with yourself about where you rank on each of these. So here are the 8 principles. So the first one is to decide clearly, specifically, and positively what you want. Too many people go through life in kind of a fog with a refusal to absolutely declare what they want in life. It shows up as simply as what are we going to have for dinner, but more importantly, it's what do I want my life to be about? Where do I want to work? How do I want to contribute? What do I need to learn in order to contribute? All of those things begin with deciding what you want clearly, specifically, and positively. It's simple. It's sometimes not easy for some people. The French proverb says that between two stools, one sits on the ground. And that's where some people get stuck. They've got all kinds of opportunities, and yet they don't really choose. A lot of people have said the equivalent of even a bad plan, when you really choose it, can work. A bad opportunity can work if you really choose it. Principle number one, decide clearly, specifically, and positively what you want, and then rate yourself. How are you doing on that? Your clarity. Where are you? Are you a 3 or are you an 8 or are you a 10? Dave, you're obviously a 10 about Avini, and that's what's attracted me and Larry, and I assume many of the people on this call today. The second principle, and this may sound like it's unnecessary, but I'm going to tell you it really is. The second principle is to be honest, first with yourself and then with others. Sir Winston Churchill said that the truth is incontrovertible, that panic may resent it, ignorance may deride it, malice may distort it, but there it is, the truth. We as human beings are often taught from a very young age to be less than fully honest because we're social animals. We want people to approve of us. That's what's behind most dishonesty in my experience. I've shared this experience on platforms all over the world. It's a true story. When we started to be really successful in Japan, one of the things that many foreigners do, and we did it, is look for ways to get out of Japan on a regular basis, to get outside of the crowding and people everywhere and all those social rules that you have living in Japan. And our choice was initially Hawaii. And because it was a bit closer than the mainland and it's a beautiful place, we fell in love with Hawaii. And originally, we bought an apartment near Waikiki and later bought a couple of condominiums on Maui. But when we were in Hawaii, we were up on an upper floor, 40 something floor. And one day, with my daughter Megan, and the way to describe Megan then and now is mouthy. This girl is articulate. She can talk and she's smart and she's very observant. So she was about 3 years old, maybe approaching 4. And we decided to go down to the swimming pool. You put on your swimming suit, throw on a cover up, and jump in the elevator. And when a couple floors down, the door opens, a woman walks in. Now, Megan today is 4 feet 11 inches tall. Now, she and her mother and her sister they're all 4'11. They all lie and say that they're 5 feet tall, but they're tiny. And she's 3 or 4 years old, so she's really small. This woman gets on the elevator and with her swimming suit and a little cover up. And so just imagine Megan on this crowded elevator. What's she looking at? She's looking right at the woman's legs. And all of a sudden, I hear her pipe up and say, "Daddy, this lady has blue lines on her legs." Anybody with children knows you've been in environments where they say something where you feel embarrassed or you wish they wouldn't have said that. Or sometimes it's, "That's cute, but please don't say it again." And that was my situation. "Daddy, this lady has blue lines on her legs." So I did this, shushing her up and smiling at the woman and hoping that the woman is not too offended by this little girl noticing her varicose veins. And then Megan says, "But Daddy, It looks like your highway map. With Google Maps and all these maps online, we forget that maps used to be on paper. And one of the things is that secondary roads were in blue, if those of you old enough to remember that. So Megan said, "But Daddy, those lines look like your highway map." So now I apologize to Megan, and a little bit of a disapproving tone creeps into my voice. If you're 3 or 4 years old, what's like a number one goal? It's the approval of your parents. And it's that relationship with your parents that could affect the rest of your life, the beliefs that come out of that. And what I had just done is I had criticized Megan for being honest. I hope you get that story. We learned from early days, because we are social animals, to edit our speech, to edit our expressions, to edit being less than fully honest. And yet, what I learned from working with these incredibly successful people is they were rigorously honest in every area of their life. So, first of all, be clear, decide clearly, specifically, positively what you want. And then, secondly, recognize that we're trained to be a little bit less than fully honest, and that movement toward rigorous honesty has huge benefits in terms of creating trust and relationships with other people. The third principle is one that we actually teach. It's what my book is mostly about, and that is to take responsibility and own your whole life. We live in a victim culture. I've decided personally, and everybody makes a choice, not to watch local and network news programs because quite often the theme is victimhood. I did accidentally, I was assembling a piece of furniture, which is a nightmare that we all put up with now. And so I had the TV on in the background, and they did what local news does. They threw the story to the street, and they interview some people on the street, and then it comes back to the what I call Ken and Barbie. Almost always, it's an attractive man and an attractive woman, and they are the newscasters. And Barbie says to Ken, "Oh, Ken, who's to blame for this?" That's a question that leads you into the weeds because blame and creates shame. Blame takes you away from personal responsibility. Everything is wrong with blame, and yet most of us are products of people pointing a finger at us and blaming us for something. It doesn't work. Owning the responsibility for your life works, and your response is everything. George Bernard Shaw, politically, is not somebody I particularly admire. He was a Marxist, but he's a brilliant writer. Of course, he wrote Pygmalion or My Fair Lady. He says that people are always blaming their circumstances for what they are. In other words, you don't choose who you are, your circumstances choose. He says, I don't believe in circumstances. The people who get on in the world are the people who get up and look for the circumstances they want. And if they can't find those circumstances, they make them. So, really owning your life and realizing, is this all up to me, is an absolute necessity for living an extraordinary life. We've done three now, right? Decide, be clear, be specific, be positive. What is it you want? Be honest. Get better at telling the truth to yourself and other people. And then own your life. Take responsibility for it. The fourth principle, oh, and remember to rate yourself from 0 to 10, avoiding the number five. The fourth principle is to express yourself. Again, we're taught to shut up. We've been shushed, to use a colloquial expression, from an early age. I did it with Megan in my little story about the going to the swimming pool. Express yourself. Put yourself out there that who you are and what you think and what you feel are important. To know that you are one of one. We're approaching 8 billion people on the planet, and there's nobody like you. There's not one fingerprint that's the same, not one iris in the eye, and all these ways they have identifying us to point out that we are one of one. We are unique. We have a gift to give to the rest of the planet, and we can only do that if we express ourselves. And staying silent is not of benefit if you want to win in the world. The fifth principle is to take risks. I'm not a perfect person. I still undisciplined in some ways. I've been terrible at staying. I've been terrific at getting married and terrible at staying married. It's a cruel kind of joke. And I struggle with my weight, and I'm not a perfect person. But one area I'll claim that I'm good at is I'm willing to take some risks. And for most of us, staying safe is the overriding value. And it's boring. It keeps us stuck. I understand its sources. Maybe we tried something and failed. Maybe we've been programmed by well-meaning people to be safe. I'm recommending the opposite, and it is number five on our list of eight. And that is take some risks, get out of your comfort zone. Henry Ford had that famous expression that if you think you can or think you can't, you're probably right. So if you're committed to staying safe, your life is going to be limited greatly. Take some risks. I moved from Green Bay, Wisconsin, where I grew up, to New York City, and then actually to Milwaukee, and then New York City to San Francisco to Tokyo, back to Colorado, or not back to, I chose to live in Colorado, Aspen, Colorado. But then I went back to Asia. I spent 6 years from 2014 to 2020 in China. One of the many adventures I've had in my life that I would not exchange for anything. It was wonderful, exciting, and worthwhile in every way. So take some risks. And they need to be measured. You need to be careful about it. But get out there and do what you fear. That's where the rewards are. The sixth principle is to participate 100% in your own life. It's using the sports metaphor, it's get out of the bleachers and get onto the field. As long as you are not participating 100%, you're like the person that sits in the bleachers and has an opinion about the people that are taking the risk, committing themselves, clear about what they want, and taking responsibility for their life. You need to participate 100% in your own life. Get on the field of play. And the preceding five principles can help you when you get on the field of play. Participate. The seventh is one of my favorites, and that is to create partnership. I get Dave getting to know you over the past 6 months. It's great to get the product and get the benefits of getting some toxics out of my system. So I'm grateful for that. But also, we've had wonderful conversations. I feel uplifted when I get off the phone with you, or when I get off one of these Zoom calls with you. I hold you as my partner, not in business, but rather in life, because I learned from you and I'm motivated after spending time with you. The Japanese proverb for this is great. They say that a single arrow is easily broken, but not three in a bundle. The moment you put three arrows together, it's pretty hard to break them. And this is true everywhere in life. Playing win instead of win lose is a big time game. My friend, the late John Denver, had a great expression that he stole, I think, from Buckminster Fuller, which is the world he wanted to create was a you and me world, not a you or me world. That's a different way of talking about win. But looking for mutual benefit in all of our relationships has incredible value. Again, I've got a lot of weaknesses. I'm not perfect. But if you're in relationship with me, you'll probably notice that I have an interest in you winning in every area of your life. And that has brought so much benefit to me in my life. And it certainly wasn't something I learned growing up. I learned that from 1,000 interviews of graduates of our program, that people that become immensely successful do so because they play win. They want you to win, and they're going to win with it. I had the late Zig Ziglar came and attended the 5 days of my sales training program many years ago. And Zig has so many sayings that just encapsulate success. But one of them is that if you want to be successful, make the people around you successful. Play win-win. And then finally, the most important of all of the principles is commit yourself. Commitment is the key. If you were going to ignore seven of these principles, the only one you really need to start with is commitment. You know it's true. Anything you're really committed to is what you'll get done. When I was living in Japan, we did buy a little house in the mountains. And so I started noticing the news around our home in the mountains. And one of the stories that I learned about was that those of us that live in the West, and particularly the Mountain West, know this is true. Every spring, that snow melts, that water rushes down those canyons, and it's exciting. If you're, especially if you're doing rafting, it's really exciting. But in many of those cases, there's a road built next to that river, that rushing river with all that cold water that was ice a couple of minutes before. And in this story, a guy is driving his truck down that road with his teen-age daughter, and he lost control of his truck, and it ends up upside down in the river with that water rushing around, and he gets thrown out of the truck as it flips and lands on the bank. But his teenage daughter is a good daughter who has her seatbelt on, and she's trapped upside down underwater in the truck. Dad, this is not a surprise to anybody. Dad swims out, swims down to the truck, gets her out of the seatbelt, and gets her to shore. Wonderful story. Not a surprise to anybody. Of course he would do that. He's her dad. Except the rest of the story is what blew my mind. This guy, first of all, broke his collarbone in the accident, getting thrown out of the truck. So he only could use one arm. And the second reality is he didn't know how to swim. So how did he rescue his daughter? One arm, rushing stream, cold, underwater, trapped in the truck, and he gets her to shore. How'd that happen? The answer is commitment. Her life was more important to him than anything else. His pain, his lack of knowledge on how to swim, his fear, all of that got overcome by his commitment to her living. And the question becomes, what's your commitment? What's mine? What are we really committed to? Helen Keller, who was blind and deaf and dumb, she's an amazing life story. If you don't know it, Google it, as they say. She said that life is either a daring adventure or nothing at all. That's what happens when you commit, when what you're up against just becomes a temporary barrier, because your commitment is going to get through that. Your commitment is going to inspire the people around you. So if all of these things that I've talked about today are mush to you, not that important, the one to remember is, what's my commitment? What would I give my life for? It is that dramatic. What would I give my life for? What am I really committed to accomplishing in this lifetime? To celebrate the one of one that I am. And that's beyond awareness, responsibility, and communication. My emphasis with my team over the years, with myself, is to pay attention to commitment, because it needs to be at a 10. And it might not be, you might be on your way there, and I hope you are, but I encourage you to not be unconscious about your level of commitment, because it's going to determine everything. So, Dave, that's my contribution for the day. If people would like to have this in writing with a lot more stuff about it, they can do so by going to extraordinarypeople.com, sign up for my newsletter, which is also free, and you'll get a 28-page document that leads you through these 8 principles. So that's it from me this morning.
Oh, this is fantastic. And I just think, wow, begin with decide. That's number one. And the final commit. And you could think, I'm just going to decide once and for all, and I'm going to commit to it. And then all those other things. Wow, it's just amazing. I'm thinking in my mind that story of that man going back and helping his daughter. And I love that thought that the moment one definitely commits oneself, then providence moves too. And that was a real life example of providence moving too. I've heard that so many times, and I love that, and I believe it. Someone else, a wit, said, and also the when you definitely commit oneself, then the gates of hell rise against you too. I think the universe just says, I'm going to test this person, and a lot of times that happens. Yeah, I'm going to do this. It's easy to be committed when it's easy, but the real commitment is when opposition arises, and it surely will. If it was easy, everyone would do it. And I love that idea that how long does it take the average person to go diamond? The average person will never go diamond. And we could use, in your terminology, extraordinary. So how long does it take the ordinary? And don't be ordinary. If you're going to go on a wonderful date with your wife, you don't think, oh, let's go find an ordinary restaurant to go out. Let's go do something nice. And
True.
yeah, play big in this. Choose to play big. Oh my goodness, this is so fun. And the phrase I love that definitely when I'm talking with you, I just got to say, Robert White, I like me best when I'm with you. You just raise my spirit, and I think this is what we want to do is be an uplifter. I think that's a lot what leadership is. And I think in my mind leadership, I've heard it said that is confidence, that confidence and charisma are almost synonymous, that if you're really confident you attract people. If you're indecisive, you're not going to attract good people. You're not even going to attract yourself. So anyway, thank you so much. This has been invaluable. So let's decide and be responsible, go to work, find a mentor, find something that just gets you on fire. I love that idea of Norman Vincent Peale talking about just be on fire about something. And if
I'm not a Methodist, but I love this story. The founder of the Methodist Church is John Wesley Powell, a British citizen. And this was before the days of amplifiers and speakers and microphones and all that stuff. And he started his ministry out in the fields outside London, where sheep were grazing and cows were grazing. And he attracted 30 people and then 300 and then 3,000. And the way it worked is that the people in the front rows would hear his message directly, and then they would repeat it to the people behind them, who repeated it to the people behind them. And so it became a cultural phenomenon. And he was interviewed by some newspaper and said, how does this happen? Why are so many people coming to you? And his answer was, he said, I simply set John Wesley Powell on fire, and the people come to watch me burn. We can have a lot of excuses as individuals to not set ourselves on fire due to fear, due to habit, due to programming, beliefs, all those things. But the key, if you're going to be successful in attracting people and building a team, is set yourself on fire because people will come to watch you burn. People are attracted to enthusiasm, and there's no substitute for it.
I think it was Thomas Carlyle said something about that. The great man or as lightning from heaven. The rest of the men, like kindling, waited to be, and that they too would be inflamed. He says it better, but it was something along that line. But well, I just think, wow, like lightning from heaven and flaming other people. It just, let's be on fire for something. Nothing great was accomplished without enthusiasm. So, yeah, and commitment and decisiveness and responsibility. Yeah. Oh, you are so good. Thank you.
Look, if people want my little weekly reminder, I've been doing it now for 17 years, every week, every Wednesday. And it's called An Extraordinary Minute with Robert White. It's all designed to be read in 1 minute or less. It's whatever occurs to me that week that I think might be of value. And you'll get this 28-page essay that is shareable. It's a PDF. You can share it with your team, with your family, colleagues, anyone about what we've learned about success. It's not the same as the experience of our trainings. I always want to make that point because only face to face can we get into depth on these issues and what stops you and what's going to work best for you. However, the general knowledge is actually all in print. And it's been known for thousands of years. It's in the Bible, it's in Lao Tzu, it's in Confucius. It's everywhere. Our job is to interpret it for our times and act on it. But life is simple. It's just not easy sometimes.
If you only do things that are easy, that's not going to amount to a lot. Easy doesn't pay well.
Very true.
Yeah. I've heard it said that what we're doing, sales in general, is the easiest low pay work and the hardest high pay work. If it's fun to do, you can do lots of it. And wow, we play hard. We could keep it going, but anyway, thank you so much. One more time. What's your website?
Extraordinarypeople.com.
Okay. Go there and choose to be extraordinary. Robert, I love you. Thank you so much.
Much love to you and your team. Dave, thank you for introducing this wonderful product that's
Mm.
benefiting my life. And thank you for inspiring people for you've done well enough to have gone away and sat on the beach. And you chose not to do that. And I absolutely admire and respect that. You're the best.
You too, Robert. Thank you. Let's be difference makers.